Hey guys, what's up? This is YouTube Vids. So normally I try to steer away on my channel from politics, and I know occasionally when we're in chat for whatever I'm doing that day, we happen to get into some back and forth regarding specific political things. But normally I try to steer away from that because obviously that creates a huge controversy and a lot of hate from both sides. It doesn't really represent the best of of American people at this point in time in our country's history. But I did want to take a few moments to state some of my opinions or give some of my opinions regarding the recent testimony that was done by the Judiciary Committee, sorry, between Dr. Ford and Brett Kavanaugh. So as you guys, most of you probably know, if you pay attention to any level of politics or any politics at this point, the big thing has been, the Republicans trying to cram through Judge Kavanaugh to the United States, to become a United States judge, essentially. So at the Supreme Court level. So that's the big thing. And so obviously the back and forth has been, oh, the Democrats are trying to hold him up, this, that, and the other. So to kind of give a quick background, Kavanaugh was essentially on the verge of, they were on the verge of having a vote essentially to push Kavanaugh through. It seemed like the Republicans were trying to force him through regardless as fast as they possibly could. He was basically the one guy that Donald Trump had said, hey, this is the guy that I think we should choose. And there were a lot of questions that came from, I would say mainly from the Democrats, because this is the way it works now. The Democrats had a lot of questions about his judgments based on emails from the past and this, that, and the other. So there was already some reason to believe that this guy possibly would not be qualified for this position based on some things that he said in the past, especially when it came to specific rulings that are essentially case law at this point. Now, I'm not going to get into all that with, I don't want to get into all that with what I'm going to cover today because I'm already going to be long-winded as it is, and I'm going to try to keep it as short as I possibly can. This is off the cuff type stuff, but I do have a lot of bullet points I wrote down because after listening, mainly I just listened to it. After listening to the committee's questions and the responses from Dr. Ford and Brett Kavanaugh, and they're separate. It was one long hearing, but essentially they had two separate hearings. One where Dr. Ford came in and they asked her questions about her allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, and then they had, essentially on the flip side, she left the room, and then Kavanaugh came in, and then they kind of had a question period for him. Her question period was very long. It was maybe, I don't know, I want to say it was like 6 hours of the video, maybe. I could be wrong. I don't remember exact time. I just remember that the video published, which I'll put in the description below, if you want to watch it or listen to it on your own free time, to be able to provide some of your own critique and not just take my opinion for your own, which I would highly suggest that you actually spend time listening to this kind of stuff and understand what's going on in our government right now and the type of debate these guys have at this point. I'm going to put that in the comments. It's a link. It's going to be a link to the raw PBS footage, like literally unedited. It was an 8.5 hour long video, but if you skip all of the breaks that they take and the lunch and stuff like that, you could probably condense it to about 6 or 5.5 hours. So I would highly encourage you to do that. But anyways, so my focus is going to be on the testimony that was provided and what I heard in that video. So first things first, like I said, they started with Dr. Ford's testimony, and Dr. Ford essentially, her accusation against Brett Kavanaugh, the whole reason why she came forward and the whole reason why they asked her to provide some testimony or testify, more or less, in a sense, was she accused Brett Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct against her when they were in high school. Apparently, she went on about like how she had described the sexual misconduct to her shrank more or less in on multiple occasions. She let her husband know, I believe, before they were married. I don't really remember what she said there, but they did say her husband, so probably after they were married. She mentioned it to her husband and other people in her life as well, in maybe lesser detail. But the point was is that people knew about it, so it brought some credibility to her charge against him, or her accusation, I should say. So that's kind of the background for anyone who doesn't know the background. And again, all this is revealed in the video. So this is kind of the Cliff's Note version, if you will, of that video. So my opinion on the whole thing is based on what I saw with her testimony. A lot of my statements or comments or bullet points aren't necessarily about what she said. And the questions that were asked there was more about how they handled how everything was handled with Kavanaugh and his part of the testimony. But my points for what I heard in the Dr. Ford, and I will say this, so this wasn't a court hearing or anything. Essentially, the Judiciary Committee is responsible at this point really for trying to determine if there's a reason to not nominate Kavanaugh or vote him into the United States Senate, or not Senate. I keep getting that mixed up, but into the Supreme Court, not nominating him as a Supreme Court justice, which again, that's a lifelong position. So basically, until you die or until you decide to step down, you are basically you are voted into that position for that period of time, whatever that period of time may end up being. So it's a very important thing, which is the reason why they're spending this time now going through all these different motions and having these conversations. But either way, so one of the things that I found in her testimony that she provided was that, and someone had pointed it out at the time in the video, if you watch it, was that her story did have gaps. Because she couldn't remember everything. She didn't remember what was the color on the wall. You know what I'm saying? Like, there were certain things that you're not going to remember, but she did remember like the things that had the most impact on her life. And the thing that she remembered had most impact on her life was that her claim she's accusing of Brett Kavanaugh and one of his buddies for forcing her into a room upstairs where the music was loud, him grinding on her body, them turning up the music, and then Brett Kavanaugh specifically putting his hand over her mouth while she was trying to yell for help. Somehow she said she managed to escape and she ran into a bathroom across the hall where she was able to close the door and lock it. And then essentially him and his buddy both walked, essentially casually down the hall and were having a laugh about the situation. And that was basically her recollection. And she talked more about other things, but again, I'm not going to get into all the detail. You can watch the video and listen to that yourself. But ultimately, the main point here was that her story that she told was not like boom, 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 boom. It wasn't clean. It wasn't neat. Which was important because the thing is that if her story had been too neat and she was able to recollect maybe too much and was able to identify like everything, then that could have been the impression or a tip off that maybe she was lying and that maybe she could have been a plant or, basically just a plant, someone to get in the way of him just being nominated for the position. So that was one of the things that I thought was very interesting. And again, like someone had pointed it out there, her testimony was not 100% clean. There were definitely things that she forgot or couldn't recollect specifically, but they weren't things that were necessarily completely relevant to the whole situation. She remembered the parts that mattered the most, in my opinion. And if you watch the video, she was very emotional. It was very hard to listen to, like without getting emotional yourself, because you could feel the pain. And that's the other thing, is that if that's one way, in my opinion, to identify a credible witness or a credible person who's throwing these accusations at Kavanaugh, You should be able to feel the emotion from them coming out, and you felt that with this lady, and you felt sad for her, like, like, wow, she went through this, and she covered the pain that she's endured over the course of her life because of it, the pain that it's caused her and her. It affects who you are in life, right? Whenever you have a traumatic experience in life, whether it's this or something else, those types of things impact you for your entire life, possibly. So she covered that and how it's impacted her over the course of her life. So now this is where I'm going to jump to. This is basically all Kavanaugh related stuff going forward. Again, I'm not here to I'm not here to slander anyone. I'm just trying to give you my opinion of what I heard. And that's pretty much it. So some of the things that one of the points that came to mind when I was listening to quite a few of the Democrats interview, essentially, or question Kavanaugh, was, a lot of them seem like they were predisposed, like it seems like they've already made up in their mind that this guy is, like, guilty. And that's, again, the court system in America is, as we all know, in theory, is innocent until proven guilty. So it was kind of bad to see that a lot of these guys, or some of these guys at least, I shouldn't say a lot, but some of these guys definitely had the mindset, it seemed, that they thought he was guilty already. So it was guilty until proven innocent. And that's just not the way things are supposed to work. And yeah, so it was unfortunate to see that reflect based on the way that certain Democratic representatives were asking their questions. Some general process observations I had about this whole process was that, so they mentioned at the beginning, they tell everyone the rules, essentially, of the question and answer process. So basically, each person that's responsible for, who's allowed to ask a question to the subject, whether it was Kavanaugh or Dr. Ford, they laid out, okay, you get 5 minutes for your questions and answers. In my opinion, that kind of ruins the whole process, because 5 minutes is not a very long period of time. I mean, especially when you're trying to ask, like, lots of simple questions, but then the person responding either has to take time to collect their thoughts. But then I'll get to another specific thing I wanted to talk about here as well, because it pertains to this whole thing. My opinion, I really feel like they need to change that process where it's more, hey, you get like 5 questions and that's it, then you're done, and so that allows you to ask your follow-up questions and your most prominent questions. But it allows you to ask your most relevant and prominent questions, follow-up questions, whatever it is, but you only get like 5 of them, essentially, and then you're done. Whereas 5 minutes, it's like I said, it's so easy for them to run out of time based on the question that's asked, and how long it takes the person to respond to you, and how they respond to you is important. Now, the reason why I bring that up, too, is because when Kavanaugh responded to the Democrat questions, in my opinion, again, this is my opinion, when Kavanaugh responded to a lot of the questions that the Democrats had for him, in some of them I felt like he was filibustering. And unfortunately, I understand why he was responding the way he was, in a sense, because of the fact that it seemed like the Democrats, or some Democrats, had already incriminated him in their minds. And so he felt the need to have to kind of throw back at them, well, this is why I'm not guilty. This is why I'm not guilty. So he always had to spend like 30 seconds explaining why he felt he wasn't guilty before he got to the point where he answered their question. But that's the reason why this whole 5-minute process doesn't work, because whether or not he was intentionally filibustering or doing those kinds of things to disallow the person asking the question the ability to follow up, I felt like that was one thing that ruined this whole process. So I felt like he was either filibustering, or because he felt he was being falsely accused or was already convicted in some of these guys' minds, he spent too much time up front providing long-winded answers to questions where they literally just said yes or no, do you agree that there should be an FBI investigation? And then he's like, well, but this, that, and that. And then, they again had to keep coming around to the question of, I just asked yes or no. Like, that's literally all you have to ask is yes or no. And then he would almost reiterate the same thing he just previously said. And so that's why you can't get in this whole, you can't be limited necessarily in time, but you have to be, these guys have to be more cooperative in just being able to answer a question. When someone asks you yes or no, a yes or no question, you should just be able to respond yes or no. Like, it's not that difficult. So anyways, those were a couple of my issues with their general process of this committee and how much, and their ability to ask questions and be able to have enough time to ask proper follow-up questions and get to the core of the more meaningful questions that they intended in asking. Instead of, the guy cutting in saying, essentially your time's up, you can't ask any more questions. So that's kind of what you're stuck with when the person responding to you has so much time to basically just take up all of your time. They could literally just take up all your time with a response and not be chopped down. Or, essentially the person asking the question has to be rude and just say, okay, that's enough. Time to move on. Like, you're not answering my question. I need to get to my other question. And sometimes they would say that, like, okay, I only got like a minute left. I have to hurry up and ask my question because I'm going to run out of time. And that's not the way it should be. All right. So, before I go any further, I guess one thing I do want to point out, and again, like, we've had these conversations in the past on the channel, again, when it's come up and we've talked about politics, I will tell you that, like, so in terms of Republican versus Democrat, I'm not necessarily one. I do tend to have more Democratic. I align myself in a sense through my opinions. I tend to be more aligned with the Democratic point of view, but generally speaking, I am more of an independent than I am one or the other. And that's more of a recent development for me because the more I listen to the way these guys talk to each other and the way they treat each other and this, that, and the other, like, I don't want to be associated with either side because they're both idiots. I mean, that's my complete and honest judgment, is they're both idiots. Both sides are stupid. And, I have definitely become more of an independent than anything else. Like I said, I tend to lean more towards the Democratic side only because I tend to align with, certain principles and values of Democrats. But generally speaking, I am an independent. I want to listen to both sides and make a decision based on that, not because I'm a Democrat and they said this and I must go along with them on that. No, that's not the way I work. It's listen to issue, let it swirl around for a little bit, give some time to think about it, and make a decision based on the facts and the information provided. And that's the best that any person can do, in life, even outside of politics, right? So anyways, I just wanted to throw that in there just so that people who are watching this, if you have any questions about my alignment, now you know. So moving on to the next point. So this was one of the most ridiculous things that I heard during this whole 8-hour video. So the committee in general, throughout the course of this whole thing, the Republican side, and I'm going to have to keep referring to it versus Republicans and Democrats because that's just the way that they point each other out. I don't, in all cases, have specific names because I wasn't taking down names, but I was listening to what these guys had to say. But from a Republican standpoint, their constant point was, the Democrats are, they're trying to slow this down because they had X number of days where they had this information from Dr. Ford, and then they waited till the last, within the last 10 days is when the letter got leaked by them, and how convenient, and it's going to slow the process down, and we don't want to wait, and this, that, and the other. And it was just constantly pointing at this leak that the Democrats supposedly had with the letter, and this, that, and the other. And they hammered this literally every opportunity they had during this whole testimony. They hammered this thing to death, and they only did it when Kavanaugh was speaking. They never did it during Ford, really. They did it during Kavanaugh the majority of the time. But the committee had in one of those aha moments, but it didn't come until like literally like the very end of the actual testimony, where finally, after all the accusations, like finally it was Feinstein who came forward and said, look, I didn't leak the letter to anyone. But everyone kept saying, like, everyone keeps saying that I leaked the letter to the press. And she said, look, I was told in confidentiality that Dr. Ford did not want this information to be leaked to the press. So that was what I did. I did not leak the information to the press. So then someone from the Republican side said, well, okay, well, if that's the case, well, then who did? And then she's like, I don't know. She's like, I didn't do it. And he's like, well, can you absolutely, positively 100% say that no one on your staff leaked the letter as well? And she's like, I haven't really talked to my staff about it. And then someone whispered in her ear and then said, oh, wait, you know what? They just reminded me, I did ask them that. And she's like, I can say without a doubt that no one from my staff leaked the letter. And they essentially kind of dropped it there. But it's like, okay, you literally tell me that you've had all these days that have gone by where this lady has been accused of leaking this letter, and literally just now someone finally just asks, like, she finally just now addresses the accusation that her or her staff had leaked this letter. I mean, to me that was just ridiculous. Like, how did this not ever come up before? How do you guys never discuss this on your own time? You waited to this testimony to finally bring this up. But to me, like, I felt like that was an aha moment for the committee overall. And I hope that ends up being a takeaway for this entire committee, because like, they literally came to no conclusion after that kind of back and forth. But it seemed like that was like a fact finding, that was something that revealed facts for both sides, or maybe more information for both sides to ponder, which they had never pondered previously. And I was just like dumbfounded by how idiotic are both of these parties right now, where it's just, you're just so used to people slandering you for being in the wrong, when even if it's not the truth. You're so used to the other side or the opposition for slandering you for being in the wrong for whatever reason, that you never refute something like this simple that you could have refuted, and you could have had this conversation already. Like, that was absolutely dumbfounding to me. And like I said, if you watch or listen to the video, it's like literally within the 8th hour of the video that they finally have this conversation. And I'm just like, wow. So my questions all that, why wasn't this already hashed out between the sides before this point of them hearing this testimony? How is this literally the last thing that was discussed after a full 8 hours of testimony? Like, it's just insane to me. Like, it's such a basic thing that came up, and it was a foundation for the Republicans, like, constantly bashing the Democratic side of this committee for this one point. And it was completely overlooked by both sides, I guess. I don't know how. And the Republicans have been pointing the fingers for weeks, yet nobody just straight up asked how the letter was leaked. Like, literally, how does no one ask that question? It's such a basic question. I don't know. I mean, but hopefully these guys have learned something as a group from this question. I mean, hopefully they all get back together and say, like, yeah, why did this just now come up, like, so late? Why did, there's such a line between the two sides that, like, this could have been one of the things that just kind of made this process so much more smooth, right? Once you have the agreement as to, okay, we didn't leak it, they didn't leak it, well, then let's find out how it got leaked. Maybe she talked to one of her friends, maybe the press did it, whatever the case may be. Somehow this information got leaked, or someone's lying. I mean, there's always that case. But again, like, if you take people at their word at this point, like, could this have been a come together, a kumbaya type moment for both sides? Hopefully something happens as a result of that information being found during the testimony. Hopefully they can learn to play nice together after hearing that. I'm going to move on. The next thing I wanted to bring up was the Lindsey Graham speech. So again, that was a prominent point. Again, Lindsey Graham went on about that. I can't remember. I don't think he didn't bring that up during the Ford speech. He brought it up during the Kavanaugh testimony, which again, that was the kind of the theme for the Republicans. And Lindsey Graham, his speech, he went on this kind of tirade of saying, like, look, if you vote no to Kavanaugh, then that means that all this craziness that's gone on for the several weeks, that means that you support that and you're in favor of that being just a norm going forward. I mean, to me, in my opinion, that was belittling to Dr. Ford and all that she's had to endure over the weeks to try to just get to this point where she would be in front of this committee with the opportunity to provide her testimony and her story and her facts and her background and all that kind of stuff. Not all the witnesses that have been talked to or asked questions have been really completely vetted. So, I mean, you literally, in my opinion, it just belittled Dr. Ford, because there has been all these people that have been involved as witnesses or have been heard from as witnesses have not been completely vetted based on my understanding of what's transpired to this point. So the whole Lindsey Graham speech about saying if you vote no, that means you support the circus that's transpired, I don't agree with that. And I think that was very irrational of him to make such a statement. I honestly felt that he might have a heart attack during that statement, because he was very passionate about his speech, but also very forceful about it as well. And again, I make a point later on about some other opinions about related to that and the Republicans giving their statements in general later on. So that was another thing that stood out was the Lindsey Graham speech. One of the things that I found was very interesting and just very irritating was that Kavanaugh multiple times mocked Democrats for asking questions related to the high school yearbook, even though the yearbook, in my opinion, was relevant to the questioning, because the yearbook is reflective of the time frame in which Dr. Ford had accused Kavanaugh of this situation happening. But Kavanaugh at some point was kind of like laughing about, and like I said, I think he was mocking Democrats for asking questions about the yearbook. He'd say, well, oh yeah, go ahead, keep asking me questions about the yearbook. I mean, for whatever reason why you want to ask it, but it's like, it's relevant, dude, because this yearbook, your quotes in your yearbook and these things that people were saying about you in the yearbook, that's reflective of that period of time. So that is absolutely, positively 100% relevant to the discussion, and yet you're basically laughing it off like it's nothing. So I felt that to me, that was negative on him to react that way about the questions that were being asked. Because honestly, and someone even mentioned it, like if the FBI or anyone else was doing an actual investigation into this whole thing, those would be one of the pieces of material that would be submitted as part of like a relevant research into the investigation. I mean, that is like, that's words on paper have meaning in a situation like this. Simple. So again, the fact that he was mocking it, very unprofessional, and that was just that did not give him, that was not a good look for him for doing that. Kavanaugh was also deflecting questions about witnesses by questioning their credibility with the information that he had provided. So, as you may or may not know, Dr. Ford had mentioned like two other people at least potentially having knowledge about her accusation against Kavanaugh and what had transpired on that day. And so they kept mentioning, well, two witnesses came forward and had already said, that didn't happen per their recollection. And then there were other people who had come out like down the line who weren't necessarily involved in the situation, or they didn't have any knowledge of the particular situation or what he was being accused of. But they did say, like, well, from my times around Kavanaugh, he was a big drinker, and he was belligerent when he drank a lot, or he had an attitude when he drank a lot. And so the way he downplayed or tried to, essentially discredit those witnesses, he would try to tell stories about, well, this guy, you can't believe him because, he didn't like the guy that we were rooming together with. And so he had this kind of mean streak or vendetta against this guy. And here's an example of something he did to this guy, which showed like how mad he was at him. And so he was basically trying to discredit the witnesses by saying, like, well, they may have had a personal vendetta against him, or maybe the people that they room with, and that's the reason why they shouldn't be listened to or have any merit. But the reason why I discredit his ability to discredit them with his stories is because of the fact that no one's really sat these guys down. No one's really sat these guys down, these other witnesses down, and been able to grill them. And that's the one complaint that the Judiciary Committee has had and has made throughout this whole process, is that even though like they had the opportunity to interview or ask questions of Dr. Ford and Kavanaugh, they have not had the opportunity to question any of these witnesses that have had written testimony that they provided in writing, essentially. So I don't feel that it's legitimate for him to just say, well, now these guys aren't credible because whatever. Well, it is he said versus she said, and you can say the same for him versus Dr. Ford's accusations, but you need to be able to have the opportunity to get these guys in front of people so that, one, there's a difference between like if you ask me a question, right? And again, this is just to prove my argument that I'm making here. If you ask me a question about something that was sensitive in my life, you couldn't tell, like, I could write you a statement and give you an answer, but you don't see the way I look or the way I act, or you don't necessarily even have the ability to ask follow-up questions in that particular case. I can provide you something written, and it can be as clear-cut as possible and say, no, I had no knowledge of this, done, right? But you don't see how I acted when oh my God, like they asked me this question, like, did my eyes get big? Did I fidget a little bit? Did I seem nervous? You know what I'm saying? Like, you didn't see the way I looked or acted or reacted when that information came my way or that questioning came my way. So you can't really tell a whole lot about the words I wrote down. You can make there is something to be said about the way people respond to things and the way that they write their response. Absolutely, positively, I can agree with that. But there is also a lot to be said about the way people look and react in person when you have the opportunity to sit them down and ask questions. That's when you can really tell a lot about a person. So for him to be so dismissive of them based on verbiage that he provided and verbiage they provided, and not having a sit down in front of the Judiciary Committee, that's a bunch of BS in my opinion. Let's see. So another point I wanted to bring up, Republicans had no problem speaking up about Kavanaugh being treated unfairly during his testimony at all. Like when he was out there giving his testimony, there were so many different Republican representatives that were like, oh, I'm so sorry that you were treated this way. And then some of them, and again, I don't think all of them did this, and my memory's a little fuzzy there, so I'm not saying that all of them didn't do this, but I don't recall that all of them also expressed the same gratitude towards Dr. Ford when Kavanaugh was there. And the reason why this is important is because so when Dr. Ford was giving her testimony, I would say about 95% of any questions that the Republicans had went through their prosecutor. So they had a special prosecutor there who was a female who basically asked all the questions. Literally, there were like none of these guys that were lined up, representing the Republican side of the questioning. None of these guys really asked any questions. They all deferred their questions to the prosecutor. So the prosecutor literally was the only one mainly interacting with Dr. Ford. Literally, you had none of those Republicans that said, you know what, I want to make a comment. I feel sorry for what you and your family have gone through, and it was good for you to come forward, and you should have come forward, and I respect you as a person for coming forward, and this is a good day for women for you coming forward. Literally none of them said that. But when Kavanaugh, the guy, the male representative, came forward, they had absolutely no problem doing that and saying that about him. And then when they would say that about him, it was like, oh, and by the way, like, also Dr. Ford, like, yeah, it was good that she came forward, or I feel bad for her too. You know, it's kind of like, oh, that's you guys, like, you're the way that you act in this particular case is so reflective of how people think that you are, and the type of people that you are. And it's like, it's so bad that you reacted that way, and the way you did it, like, you should have done that stuff when Dr. Ford was up there speaking, and spoke your mind then, instead of like, oh, and by the way, like, her too, you know, I guess, you know, she got dragged through the mud too by other people for her coming out and accusing him to begin with. So that, I just felt, to me, that was a bad look for Republicans. And like I said, it just, like, it speaks volumes to who these guys really are, in my opinion. And it's just a bad look. Let's see. My opinion, Republicans did not ask any tough questions to Brett Kavanaugh. You know, their questions were basically like, here, let me build this up for you, and I'm going to build this little box, and I'm going to ask you, like, questions inside this little box, and they're going to be like, did you brush your teeth this morning? Did you drink water while you were under testimony? You know, it's like these questions that they were throwing at this guy were so softball questions. In my opinion, like, even the most grilling question, which again, I don't understand why this carries any merit. I mean, I understand why it does, because it depends on how religious you are. But this is, again, like, church and state are separate in theory. But, you know, and obviously Republicans run based on the foundation that you believe in God and this, that, and the other. And I understand it, but that has no merit in questioning. Like, people, if you're truthful, you're truthful. Whether or not you believe in God should have nothing to do with whether or not you are capable of telling the truth. And I would think that most people should be able to agree with that. Whether or not you believe in God does not dictate whether or not you have a good moral compass. This guy, Mr. Kennedy, at the very end, you know, he basically was like, I want you to look into my eyes, and, you know, with God watching over, you need to answer these questions truthfully. Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do that? And, you know, he kind of looked at him and gave him his answers. But it's like, that was probably the most grilling part of the testimony for Kavanaugh. The Republicans did absolutely nothing to drill into him and try to ask the tough questions. You know, maybe the Democrats were doing well enough with asking their questions, but it just didn't seem like they had much interest in holding things up. And that's, I think, been the biggest complaint from the Democrat side, is someone's come forward and accused you of this crime, which doesn't make you guilty. Absolutely. It does not make him guilty. He's not automatically guilty because someone came forward and accused him, but it should be treated with a level of seriousness. And it doesn't seem like the Republican side, they are treating it with any level of seriousness, other than, well, the Democrats brought it up late and they shouldn't have brought it up so late, and they had their time to do an investigation, and you should have done an investigation. You had time to do the investigation or ask for the investigation. You can still ask for an investigation, but at the same time, we're not holding this up because of an investigation. We're trying to get this guy through. And it's like, but you're proving the Democrats' point by acting the way that you're acting. And that's the unfortunate side of all of this, is that, you know, they're playing into the hands of the Democrats, and in my opinion, it makes them look bad. You know, I don't know what else to say. Let's see. So again, my overall point there was just, again, I felt like the Republicans, they didn't have a lot of individual representation to ask questions of Dr. Ford. They all went through the female prosecutor, and for all the guys who asked questions of Brett Kavanaugh, which they did not, they had some questions go through the prosecutor, but the prosecutor's involvement during the Kavanaugh questioning was very limited. It was maybe like 10 minutes of his total time, when they had like multiple hours of asking this guy questions. Whereas with Dr. Ford, it was like 90% of the time of the questions came through the prosecutor. So, and then again, like I said, but anyways, it doesn't matter. We'll move on. I already made my point there. So, the Republicans also, in my opinion, yeah, so one of the things that came up too was the Republicans and Kavanaugh both seem to think that the committee alone had access to enough information to make an informed decision to confirm Brett Kavanaugh at this point, which and Kavanaugh seemed to be, in some of his responses, or at least in one of his responses that I recall, he definitely seemed to be more interested in being confirmed versus letting a vetting process take place across all witnesses. So even he at some point seemed to be, whether it was through his filibustering, his apparent filibustering and his responses to the Democrat questions, or just his kind of briefness in responses, or maybe his vagueness in responses. He even seemed to be kind of taking the political side of, well, this could have happened a while ago and it didn't, and this was all kind of thrown at me at the last minute. And it seemed to be like the Republicans and Kavanaugh at times were making excuses for, well, this shouldn't matter now because if you wanted to do this 45 days ago was the appropriate time to be able to do this, and you're just out of time now. I mean, whether or not the woman came forward like a year ago or now, in this process, why should that matter? Ultimately, that is the question that Republicans need to be able to answer. Like, how do you let yourself sleep when you really think that the timing of when this woman came forward matters in the decision to confirm this guy right now? I mean, I understand that there's some political aspect to this, or there could be some political aspect to it, because of the elections coming in November, this, that, and the other. And I completely understand that there's always that possibility that there could be some part of this. But let's pretend there's not. Let's pretend that we live in a civil society where politics doesn't matter. What's the difference if this lady came forward 45 days ago or last week? Give me that answer. I mean, I don't think there's a difference, and it shouldn't really matter. If she came forward now and there's a reason to believe that this could lead to his character being questionable, and this guy, again, being nominated or confirmed for a very high power position in our government, I mean, you need to make sure that you are very extreme in vetting this guy and any witnesses that are involved in this process. End of story. Like, that's really what it comes down to. But between Kavanaugh and the Republican side, their focus seems to be more on, well, but they took too long, so why did you're late, you're too late, and so we just need to move forward. That is not solid reasoning for just pushing this guy into the Supreme Court. Absolutely not good enough for a good enough reasoning to do that. So that was my point there. So I don't know. Last but not least, I have some final comments about just the government in general. I mean, the one thing that this made absolutely clear to me is our country is in desperate need of needing to eliminate this two-party system. I mean, I've said it before in like past chats, like when politics have come up. I'm hoping that you guys have heard me say that before. If not, then this is the first time you're hearing me. Then you're hearing me say it now. But I've said it before. We absolutely need to remove this ridiculous two-party system in our country. I mean, I'm sick and tired of, well, you're a Republican and you're a Democrat, and Republicans believe this and Democrats believe that, and you're conservative or liberal. I mean, who gives a flying F what someone is? I mean, to be completely honest, who really cares? I mean, I understand there's the reason you can affiliate with someone with a certain party because of the fact that they have certain beliefs and certain parties have certain beliefs, but who cares? Who cares what certain parties believe, and who cares what certain people believe? I mean, to be honest, like, why is there this obsession with throwing a person into a specific corner? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's, Republicans and Democrats are like gangs, more or less, and there's a reason you're either the Crips or you're the Bloods, because of the way that you think about, this value or this value or this amendment versus this amendment. It's just absolutely asinine. Why can't someone believe that, what, I want to have a right to bear guns, but I'm also very liberal about certain positions? Does that make me a Republican or Democrat? People, you could probably spend months trying to figure out, am I really a Republican or Democrat because of my beliefs, or am I an independent? Who gives a crap? Like, that is like the one thing, in my opinion, that bogs down the system more than anything else, is because of the fact that people are laying claim to Republican, Democrat, this, that, and the other. Who gives a crap? Just get rid of this crap, and just everyone should just be able to represent themselves. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. Everyone should be in there representing the people of the country, regardless of what their thoughts are. If most of the people in the country think this, then I would expect that of all those people in the room representing all of the people in the country, they should think this. Not that, or what they think. It's what the majority thinks and what the majority is asking for. Which leads me to my next point, is that, in my opinion, the government is broken because of that. I don't get the opinion based on hearing especially this whole process that I watched today or listened to today. I mean, nobody really seems to care about the people. I don't think our government is about the people anymore. It's about politics and being able to pit people in a certain corner and have reasons to get mad at people and tell other people why they're a detriment to the country. And Lindsey Graham's rants about like, you want power and I hope you don't get it because this is what you're gonna do with it. I mean, it's just like, come on, guys, grow up. You're acting like a bunch of little kids. Stop. We're all adults. Let's just have conversations. I understand that people are going to get loud and people are going to argue about specific points, and that's fine that we do that, but let's not argue and bicker over what, the Democrats are this and they think that, and the Democrats did this, the Republicans did that. I mean, just come on. Grow up, people. Put on your big boy pants. Let's go to work, right? A couple other points is that I think both sides overlook the fact that not everything that everyone is saying or doing has to be for political gain. I mean, is there any reason why someone can't just feel a certain way about a certain topic and just be so emphatic or passionate about it that, they're willing to do anything they can to defend it? No, because as soon as you do that, just because it happens to align with how another party's traditional values, apparently, no, you're just a Democrat and you're just trying to prevent me from doing this because you think this way and Democrats typically think this way. I mean, it's just like, again, like, there's no reason why people can't just feel a certain way about a certain topic and just be so passionate about it. Why have to make it a Democrat, or why does it have to be something party related? You know what I'm saying? I just absolutely despise the fact that this is where we're at as a country. And then my last kind of point, I guess, is, my last point is that also when either side makes points about how another side represents itself, it's always got to be the extreme. Essentially, we all know that there's the alt-right, and then there's essentially the alt-left or Antifa or whatever the hell you want to call it at this point. I don't really care. It's a bunch of BS to me. It's not that I disagree that those sides don't exist. I do agree that there is a far right in a sense, and there is a far left in a sense, like people that are so extreme on both sides of the spectrum about specific things. But it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you're on the far right doesn't mean that you can't believe certain things that Democrats believe. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's my problem with pitting people into specific categories. But you almost have to do it in order to make certain points sometimes. But that's what people are doing, is you're having to categorize people just to try to make these points. And I feel like it's wrong, because not everyone is just one thing. And it's just wrong. It's wrong to make people or put people in those categories. There's rarely a middle ground when these guys have a discussion, and that's extremely unfortunate. It's so unfortunate that our country has come to this. Let's see. That's I don't know, guys. That's basically all I wanted to cover today. This is a very long video. I mean, wow. I've been almost going on for 50 minutes now. I didn't intend for this to be this long, but I knew it was going to be a long video. So, I appreciate it if you were willing to stick around and listen to just my opinions and my thoughts. Let me know in the comments below if there's specific things that you disagree with about what I said. Feel free to state your opinion. I can't question I can't say whether or not your opinion's right or wrong, because everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But I wanted to give you my perspective on what I heard through the testimony that I heard today, because it really a lot of the things I was hearing struck a chord with me, and it really disturbed me, and I wanted to make my voice heard. So if you want your voice to be heard, be sure to leave a comment in the comment section, guys. Let me know what you think about what I said, whether you agree or disagree. We can have a adult conversation. We can have adult, capable, back and forth conversation with, arguments, reasoning, whatever it is. But, I look forward to hearing from you guys, and your feedback. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And again, I'll leave a link to the PBS video at the bottom. It's unedited, straight 8.5 hours of just government crap. So if you are willing to take some time out of your life, which I think you should, to watch and or listen to that video, it'll be down there for you to do that. And thanks again, guys. Bye-bye.